Red Hollow was a kind of town where violent crime was something people discussed as a distant problem, something that happened elsewhere. With fewer than 4,000 residents, most people knew each other by name, and the local police department rarely handled more than traffic stops or minor disturbances. That sense of familiarity was shattered early one morning when a maintenance worker cutting across an unused service road noticed something lying behind the old grain silos at the edge of town. From a distance, it looked like discarded clothing. When he approached, he realized it was a body. The victim was later identified as Emily Harper, 27 years old, born and raised in Red Hollow. She worked at a small insurance office, volunteered occasionally at church events, and lived alone in a rented house not far from downtown. There was nothing in her background that suggested she was at risk. She had no criminal history, no known disputes, and no recent signs of instability. Her death came as a shock to everyone who knew her. The medical examiner determined that Emily had been strangled. There were no signs of a struggle at the location where her body was found, indicating she had been killed elsewhere and transported after death. Her purse and phone were missing, but her jewelry and clothing were intact. Robbery was quickly ruled out. The placement of the body suggested haste rather than careful concealment. For local investigators, the case presented immediate challenges. Red Hollow had not experienced a homicide in over a decade, and resources were limited. Officers canvassed the area, interviewed neighbors, co-workers, friends, and family members. Emily had been seen at a grocery store the evening before she disappeared. But after that, no one could say where she went or who she was with. Her car was still parked in her driveway. There were no signs of forced entry at her home. What stood out early was that Emily appeared to have left willingly. There was no evidence of a struggle in her house, no broken items, no disturbance. Investigators believed she left with someone she trusted. Several days into the investigation, a financial anomaly redirected the case. Emily's bank record showed a small transaction at a gas station nearly 40 miles away, just across the state line, made shortly after midnight on the night she was killed. This was inconsistent with her routine. Emily rarely drove late at night and had no known reason to be in that area. Security footage from the gas station showed Emily's car at the pump. Standing near the passenger side was a man, partially obscured by the camera angle. His face was not clearly visible, but the footage confirmed she was not alone. At this point, local authorities contacted state investigators. The case was no longer confined to Red Hollow, and the movement across state lines complicated jurisdiction. Phone records were subpoenaed, and traffic cameras along nearby highways were reviewed. Emily's phone, later recovered damage along a rural road, revealed repeated calls to one number shortly before midnight. The number was registered to Thomas Keller. Keller lived nearly 200 miles away in a neighboring state. On paper, he appeared unremarkable. He worked in a mid-level corporate role that required frequent travel. He had no criminal record and no obvious connection to Emily when investigators first contacted him. He stated that he barely knew her, claiming they had met briefly months earlier at a professional conference and exchanged contact information. Digital evidence contradicted that account almost immediately. Phone records showed weeks of frequent communication between Keller and Emily, including long late-night calls. When confronted, Keller revised his statement, admitting they had stayed in touch but insisting the relationship never progressed beyond conversations. He denied seeing her recently. License plate reader data told a different story. Keller's vehicle had entered Red Hollow on the night Emily disappeared. Toll records and traffic cameras tracked his movements back across the state line a few hours later. GPS data obtained through a warrant placed his vehicle on rural roads near where Emily's phone was later found. The scope of the investigation continued to expand. With confirmed interstate movement, mounting digital evidence, and inconsistent statements from Keller, federal authorities were notified. The FBI formally assumed control of the case, citing jurisdictional complexity and the likelihood of premeditated interstate activity. Federal agents brought specialized resources. Behavioral analysts reviewed Keller's communication patterns. Digital forensic teams reconstructed deleted data from devices and cloud backups. What emerged was a consistent pattern of behavior. Keller frequently initiated relationships with women in smaller towns during work trips. Several women later reported that he became controlling and aggressive when they attempted to disengage. None had previously reported him to police. Investigators concluded that Emily had likely attempted to distance herself from Keller. Phone data showed missed calls from the night she disappeared, followed by a brief outgoing call from Emily shortly before she left her home. There was no evidence of forced entry, supporting the theory that she met Keller voluntarily. Forensic examination of Keller's vehicle revealed trace fibers consistent with Emily's clothing and microscopic blood traces that had been cleaned but not fully removed. Cell phone location data placed Keller near the grain silos during the early morning hours. His own phone records contradicted his statements about where he had been that night. Keller was arrested at his apartment without incident. During questioning, he declined to answer further questions and requested legal counsel. Prosecutors later stated that one of the most significant pieces of evidence came from cloud-stored data Keller believed had been permanently deleted. Location history and message fragments recovered from backups provided a near-complete timeline of his movements. The trial focused on evidence rather than emotion. Prosecutors presented a clear sequence of events supported by digital records, forensic findings, and behavioral analysis. The defense argued that the case relied too heavily on circumstantial evidence, emphasizing the absence of eyewitnesses or confession. The jury disagreed. After 2 days of deliberation, Keller was found guilty of murder and interstate kidnapping resulting in death. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. For Red Hollow, the aftermath was lasting. The FBI eventually left and media attention faded. But the sense of safety the town once took for granted was permanently altered. The case demonstrated how violence can originate outside a community and how modern crimes often extend beyond geographic boundaries. The FBI took over this small-town homicide because it was never truly a small-town crime. It was calculated, mobile, and dependent on distance as a tool. What ultimately brought justice was not proximity, but persistence. Proof that even when a crime crosses state lines, accountability follows. If you found this case informative and thought-provoking, please like the video, subscribe for more true crime stories, share with others, and leave a comment below telling us what you learned from this case.